Prompted by leadership from Organization for Minorities of India, a coalition is formed to encourage the United States Congress to pass House Resolution 417, which is titled, Praising India's Rich Religious Diversity and Commitment to Tolerance and Equality, and Reaffirming the Need to Protect the Rights and Freedoms of Religious Minorities. The American Religious Freedom Coalition includes Geneva Liberty Group, Hispanic Values Union, Sikh Information Center, Bhimrao Ambedkar Sikh Foundation, and Organization for Minorities of India. Together, these groups are advocating for passage of House Resolution 417 to address the ongoing problem of human rights and religious freedom violations in India. This resolution is the leading solution in 2014 for Americans who are concerned by the extensive history of such violations, as well as by the Indian government's failure to curb violence against minorities and its frequent involvement in and sponsorship of such violence. So, what is the problem? Since India became independent in 1947, minorities have been the target of multiple genocides. In the modern era, violence particularly expanded in 1984. The Indian government responds with total impunity as Christians, Muslims, and Sikhs, among others, are specifically targeted. The actors involved are variously state security forces and Hindu supremacists, who cannot always be distinguished from one another and do often act in concert. Hindu supremacism being the underlying reason for much of the violence against minorities also means that those who are considered by the Hindu religion to be from so-called low-caste or outcaste backgrounds are especially vulnerable. A related aspect of the violence, especially that perpetrated by the state, is that minorities are often made victims as a consequence of standing up to tyrannical laws, or sometimes just lawless tyrants. This was the case, for instance, in June 1984, when Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, a member of the Congress Party, launched a full-scale military invasion of the Sikh Golden Temple in Punjab as a delayed revenge against Sikh community leaders who had drawn her wrath for opposing her assumption of dictatorial powers in the mid-1970s, when she declared a national emergency to avoid losing her seat in Parliament for engaging in electoral fraud. Her military invasion of the holiest shrine of the Sikh people, which she scheduled at the height of the busiest Sikh festival so as to cause the largest number of civilian casualties possible, understandably made some people very angry. So angry, in fact, that two of her very own trusted bodyguards, who were Sikhs, independently took it upon themselves to assassinate her. The Congress Party seized this as an opportunity to orchestrate a genocide against the Sikh people. Evidence suggests that this genocide was planned before her assassination even took place. Many different eyewitnesses saw sitting members of Parliament organizing mobs, distributing weapons, offering cash bounties, giving orders, and leading rioters using prepared lists of Sikh-owned businesses and residences to systematically and most brutally slaughter thousands of Sikhs in the streets of New Delhi and other areas of India. As documented by the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom in its 2011 report on India, first, 1984 can be credited as a primary origin point of India's policy of impunity for violence against minorities, particularly because it was a state-sponsored genocide. Second, virtually no one was ever brought to justice for this genocide. In fact, these are the faces of several prominent personalities involved in organizing the violence, who remain heavily involved in Indian society and politics to the present day. Most notable is Kamal Nath, pictured on the top left, who was witnessed directing a violent mob of approximately 4,000 Hindus, which destroyed Gurdwara Rakab Ganj in New Delhi. He is, today, tragically and ironically, the Union Minister for Urban Development. The result was not only the loss of thousands upon thousands of innocent Sikh lives, which were snatched away in the most sadistic manner possible. For instance, many were dismembered, disemboweled, burned alive, gang-raped, or similarly brutalized, but also the loss of confidence in the Indian state's interest in protecting the lives and liberty of its minority populations. So, who else has suffered in the 30 years of impunity since the 1984 genocide of Sikhs? In 1992, L.K. Advani, then a member of parliament from the Bharatiya Janata Party, known as the BJP, urged mobs of Hindu supremacists to personally destroy the Babri Mosque in Ayodhya. The mosque is a long-disputed site which both Hindus and Muslims claim is sacred to their religions. The attack sparked anti-Muslim violence throughout the region, particularly in Mumbai. Thousands died. As reported by the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom in 2009, virtually everyone who was charged with instigating or conducting the violence was acquitted. Advani was later rewarded when the BJP took power, and he served as Deputy Prime Minister of India from 2000 to 2004. One of the most notable beginnings of violence against Christians in the state of Odisha, then called Orissa, occurred in 1999, when Hindu supremacists murdered an Australian missionary and his 2 young sons. Graham Staines was active in India since 1965. In 1982, he established the Mayurbhanj Leprosy Home to provide housing and medical care for lepers. While traveling one night, he and his 2 young sons stopped to sleep in their car, which was then surrounded by approximately 50 people who proceeded to burn them alive. The supposed ringleader was caught and convicted, but only 12 years after the fact, and his sentence of death was later commuted to life imprisonment. Muslims again felt the pain of genocidal assault in 2002, this time with even more direct state sponsorship. In Gujarat, some thousands of Muslims were massacred in manners similar to those seen in the 1984 genocide of Sikhs. They were dismembered, burned alive, gang-raped, and variously murdered in other horrific manners. Once again, the organized mobs of Hindu supremacists who roamed the streets seemed unusually well prepared. They were equipped with lists of homes and businesses owned by Muslims, and they also murdered Christians. Religious buildings were a favorite target of the rioters, who burned thousands of mosques and churches. In 2011, the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom implicated Gujarati Chief Minister Narendra Modi as one of the masterminds of the genocide. They joined the ranks of many other organizations, including Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and even various whistleblowers from Modi's own administration, including both police and elected officials, who accuse him of being directly involved in the violence. Specifically, Modi is said to have ordered the state police force to stand down and refrain from interfering with rampaging mobs. Eyewitnesses report that in a great many situations, police actually joined in the violence and fired on victims who were attempting to flee their attackers. Christians in Odisha experienced a harsh blow in 2008 when Hindu supremacists used the assassination of a Hindu Swami as an excuse to unleash hellish attacks on Christians throughout the state. Although Christians denied any involvement in the assassination, and members of a Maoist insurgent movement actually claimed credit for the assassination, rioters were uninterested in the facts of the matter and instead simply attacked Christians en masse. 40 people died, according to the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. But tens of thousands more were displaced, and many, many thousands of properties, including homes, businesses, and churches, were demolished. In one of the most repulsive incidents in the genocide, a nun named Sister Meena Lalita Barwa was attacked by a mob of approximately 50 men who were armed with axes, iron rods, and sickles. She was seized while in a prayer hall and gang-raped while a priest, who was also seized by the mob, was burned alive beside her. Then the mob paraded her, half-naked, past a group of 12 police officers who, as reported by Sister Barwa, ignored her and talked in a very friendly manner to her attackers. One of the leading instigators of the violence, who at the time was a member of the state legislature, was charged 2 years after the fact, but then he was released after paying a minor fine, even after being held accountable for one homicide. He has since returned to the legislature. The United States Commission on International Religious Freedom pulls no punches in drawing conclusions from evidences like those mentioned. Justice for religious minorities in India, it says, remains slow and ineffective, and this has fostered a climate of impunity. The masterminds of violence against minorities are rarely charged, and when they are typically set free or released with very minor penalties. Police are often involved. Elected officials are also often involved. To put it mildly, justice has not been fully achieved. For this reason, the Commission placed India on its watch list in 2009. India joins the ignoble company of other tyrannical states like Egypt, Somalia, and Venezuela. Those who protest the violence in India are themselves threatened with violence, both by the state and by Hindu supremacists, who, once again, are often indistinguishable from one another. For instance, renowned author Arundhati Roy, who is a regular critic of anti-minority policies in India, notes the intimidation tactics employed by the Hindu supremacist Bharatiya Janata Party in an attempt to silence her expression of alternative views on the Indian state's ongoing and bloody occupation of Kashmir. This attempt was preceded by calls from politicians for her arrest for no other reason than that she visited Kashmir and wrote about it and spoke about it. Meanwhile, the state directly sponsors the murder of human rights activists who document its own crimes against minorities. On the right is pictured Jaswant Singh Kalra, who documented the Indian state's systematic disappearance, extrajudicial execution, and illegal cremation of approximately 25,000 Sikhs in Punjab between 1984 and 1994. As a result of his efforts, he was disappeared by Indian police in 1995, killed in custody, and then dumped in a canal. On the left is pictured Jalil Andrabi, who documented the Indian state's systematic disappearance and extrajudicial execution of approximately 40,000 Muslims in Kashmir between 1990 and 1996. As a result, he was disappeared by the Indian Army in 1996, killed in custody, and dumped in a river. With impunity prevailing for such crimes, it is no surprise that Hindutva, the political term for Hindu supremacism, is flourishing. As the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom noted in 2011, the ideology of Hindutva, which holds non-Hindus as foreign to India, has broad popular support. A chief indicator of the rise of Hindutva in 2014 is the success of Gujarati Chief Minister Narendra Modi of the Bharatiya Janata Party. He is the BJP's candidate for Prime Minister. His chief opponent is Congress Party candidate Rahul Gandhi, whose grandmother was Indira Gandhi, the architect of the invasion of the Sikh Golden Temple, and whose father was Rajiv Gandhi, Indira's son and successor as Prime Minister, who is credited with helping orchestrate the 1984 genocide of Sikhs. Minorities in India are indeed between a rock and a very hard place. Despite the clear conclusions of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, which is an independent body of the U.S. State Department, the United States recently reversed its policy of cold-shouldering Narendra Modi. The U.S. Ambassador to India, for instance, Nancy Powell, recently sat down for a chummy chat with Modi on February 13, 2014. On the day before Valentine's Day, the so-called Butcher of Gujarat even gave Ambassador Powell a bouquet of flowers. Meanwhile, the U.S. is expanding its military involvement in cooperation with the Indian Army. The chiefs of staff of the two armies recently sat down for talks, which included plans for increasing joint training exercises and military exchanges. So, what is the solution? There is a different path the United States could take. The first step on that path would be to pass House Resolution 417, which would require, primarily, that religious freedom and human rights issues be made a central aspect, a cornerstone, if you will, of formal dialogue with India. The resolution is all-inclusive of minorities, and it is the leading opportunity for Americans, through their representatives, to express opposition to oppression and to maintain the United States' long-standing tradition of seeking to be a shining beacon of liberty for the rest of the world. A secondary aspect of the resolution is that it commends the U.S. government for denying Modi entry into the country in 2005 and sets a precedent for refusing to place politics over principles and for valuing human life over political shenanigans. House Resolution 417 addresses, point by point, most of the anti-minority incidents of violence which have been documented within this presentation. This is particularly valuable because it means the United States Congress, rather than brushing these incidents under the rug, would instead openly acknowledge them and make them a part of public record, which cannot be ignored when talking with the Indian government. As you can see, our coalition has been hard at work in drawing the public's attention to these issues and to the pressing urgency of passing House Resolution 417. Thanks to our efforts, many different media outlets have generously reported on this opportunity to rise in defense of the oppressed. So, what can you do? It's simple, easy, and straightforward to help, and your action can have a huge impact. First, call your congressional representative today. Second, when you call them, ask them to co-sponsor House Resolution 417 to defend religious freedom for minorities in India. Third, schedule a meeting with your representative to provide them with more information. Fourth, ask your friends and family to do the same thing. Fifth, contact us at Organization for Minorities of India to stay informed. Thank you for your time.